Hello, this is Paula Guthrie from Creating Purpose with Pau. I welcome you to the Spanglish World Network and her network on Zingo TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download Zingo TV app on their respective app stores. While you download the app, please rate it and leave a comment because feedback is important to us. The app is totally free. You can also find Zingo TV on Google Chromecast, on Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku, Roku sticks, and also all smart TVs from 2060 and forward. Thank you for being here. Today in the house, we have Laura Ollinger. She is a master certified health and wellness practitioner, and I welcome her to the house. Thank you, Laura, for being here.
Thank you. So nice to be here with you.
Yay! So please share a little bit about your background, who you are, so we get to know you a little bit more.
Sure. So I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I'm the middle of three girls, and we only had a girl cat, or we even had a girl cat. So my dad was definitely outnumbered. But I just grew up in a just traditional, normal American family, and my parents were just very supportive and loving. And I've lived in several cities: Boston, Breckenridge, Colorado, Dallas, and now I'm in Austin, Texas. Oh, and I should mention I'm a single mom. I have four children who are 14, a girl, a 12-year-old boy, 11-year-old boy, and a 9-year-old girl. So they keep me very busy. For sure.
Awesome. That sounds like fun. Now it's May, Mental Awareness Month. So what are your thoughts about mental health?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge topic. And I think people, when they hear mental health, they just automatically think like bad stuff. Like a lot of severe mental illness is one extreme, but the World Health Organization defines wellness as not just the absence of presence, but it's on a spectrum. So it can also be this presence of positive, a dynamic process of balance and mental health, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. So I think to bring that idea that it's not always negative, but like we can have positive mental health, we can have good mental health. And so I think that's something that people should, it's like when you try to meet a goal, you don't want to just meet the goal, you want to surpass the goal. So it's not just that we don't want to be negative, have negative mental health. We want to like shoot for really high positive mental health.
Yes, I agree with you. Like balance, right? Our mental health because life happens. And there is times that is like there is a storm that we walk through, but it's the part of life, I think, trying to achieve the balance on our mental health. And yes, I agree with you that it's not just our psychology, but it's also our emotions, our physical health, like you were saying, and our spiritual. So yay.
Right.
So share with us, what motivated you to become a master certified health and wellness practitioner?
Yeah, so I think when I went to college in undergrad, I just was thinking, how am I going to get a job after college? And so I kind of took this very traditional path of taking classes that got me a job. And, it just wasn't filling my soul. And so once my kids were old enough to be in school, I decided, well, now's my time to not have a job, but to have a career. And so I took a career coaching course, which was awesome. I don't know if I can say the name of it, but it was called A Path That Fits. And it was like this 3-month, very intensive process with just a ton of activities and exercises that guided me through helping me figure out what my passion was. And the whole idea is actually to combine your passions and your gifts and your personality. So one of the activities was to ask your friends how they see you and what they think you would be good at doing. And then another thing that really kind of resonated with me the most was this idea of going to Barnes and Noble. And it's like, assuming you're not in the fiction section, what sections do you gravitate towards? And my whole life, I've always been really into health. And then I've also really been into psychology. And those two things like mix perfectly. into creating the career that I have created, which is just a variety of modalities that I use to help people and coach them forward and to be the best version of themselves. So that's really how it all happened, and it's it's a dynamic process as well. I keep adding different things that I'm learning, and it's evolving.
Awesome. How do you find the purpose? Like, how do you find the purpose to like, I ask you this question because to me, it was challenging at the beginning, especially taking that step and the assurance that is like, this is what I want and this is what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then going against the traditional, education, going against a lot of beliefs that it was uncertain at a time because it was a new discovery, but I was so excited and so like I felt the passion and calling for it. But like I said, it's not a like you do have a traditional educate. You have a master's degree, so uh, uh, but how do you find the purpose to say this is like this is what I want and I'm going to make it happen?
Yeah, so several things happened personally in my life. Unfortunately, my nephew committed suicide. He took his own life. And that was just a huge wake up call to me. I mean, I obviously just, you never think that you're ever going to be related to someone who does that. And so that kind of combined with, at the same time, my oldest daughter was experiencing bullying and a lot of struggles personally, socially. And so, as I was doing my master's degree, I have a master's in education and health and wellness and also a functional medicine health coaching certification. That, helping teenagers became my purpose because that's when I realized there was such a great need. It's like I could help adults all day long, but I really see the struggle in teenagers that they're experiencing these days. Like I said, I grew up in, St. Louis, Missouri, the middle of the country in the 80s and the 90s. And my life was just so normal. And looking back, I don't feel like I faced the types of struggles that our kids, this generation, is now facing. Things are just different. Times have changed. Everything is just way out of control. But that's a whole nother topic. But to answer your question, yeah, it was really just that personal part. I wanted to do something from my heart and help people. So that's how it started.
Wow. uh Speechless, like losing a nephew. uh I see how you can bring a lot of contrast, to our teenagers and even parents, bring awareness. Sometimes we need the contrast in our lives where it's like we get into a routine, right? And we just live the day to day. Because I do it, there's times where it's like I'm on my own bubble. But it's whenever I like hear stories like you're sharing about your nephew, that is like it brings the contrast where it's like, oh my goodness, okay, I have teenagers. And it's like how can I help them, how can I guide them where it's like they don't take that path, or how, what awareness can I bring into his life where it's like he knows that he's loved, that he matters, that we can shift, like balance the mental health that we're talking about, which you and I understand that it is brain health.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are some of the situations you think that our teens are are living or are experiencing that we didn't when we were younger?
For sure. So I think if you could boil it down to one word, it would be pressure. So the amount of pressure we're, as a society, putting our kids under is just enormous. So they have the pressure of making good grades and trying to get into a good college. They have the pressure of this immense, there's a competition. There's this culture of competition that we have. And so part of that is grades, competing against each other. But then there's the competition of the extracurricular activities. So the sports, the cheer, my daughter's also in theater, so she had to try out to get a part, and it's this feeling of competition. And then the pressure that they're also under is really social. From the beginning of time, we've always, as humans, needed to fit in and have the desire to be part of a group, because that's how we survive as humans. If you're get cast out of the group, that means you're dying. You're going to die. It's like you need community to survive. And so, teenagers are going through such major changes biologically in their mind. All the hormones and chemicals and changes and growth that's developing creates this kind of crazy, toxic brew of, these brain chemicals and emotions. And so that just amplifies these problems. And so then, you add on the next layer, which is the type of thing that we're now experiencing, or our kids are experiencing, that we didn't, which is the social media. So, you cannot find a teenager that doesn't have their phone and a social media account. At least I can't. I don't know any. And so that just kind of makes this, like, magnifies that social component. So it adds on lots of kind of negative thinking patterns. And so there's, the comparison is amplified on there. There's the feeling of creating an opinion about yourself, which is, your self-worth, your self-confidence, your self-esteem. The kids are letting others dictate that for them. So the number of likes that they get, whether or not the FOMO, they might see pictures of a social event that they weren't invited to, and so now they're feeling bad about themselves. So
Yes.
it's just
Yeah,
a whole,
you're right.
you know.
Yeah, because now I remember, like, we would go home for school, like from school to the house, right? And then the school day was done, like you have to wait till the next day to see your friends, to continue to talk and see, to
Yeah,
continue. But now it's like you go home, but then you have social media, and then they can post pictures of what they did at school. And I think you were sharing a story that there was a problem at a school where girls were not eating because there were kids taking pictures of people, like, as they were about to get a bite. So they
yeah,
were afraid to be in that, in that post where it's like they were about to eat. And I mean, nobody wants to see a picture of us eating. So yeah, there is a lot more pressure, way more than what we had. And we have to do something about it. We have to work with our teenagers as parents, as leaders, to guide them where we can help them see their true identity, who they truly are,
mhm,
like, to teach them to find their own validation. Sorry.
yeah.
uh,
I'll give you some water for a second. Yeah, and I to add on to that, I want to present the idea that parents are the first leader that a child ever has. So as a child's growing up, that's their model for what a leader is. And I've noticed, it's interesting how some parents, their style of leadership is very authoritarian or some type of a dictatorship, where and that's why teenage years have this reputation for being so hard. Everybody makes such a big deal out of it, like, oh gosh, now I have a teenager, right? Oh, that's such a big deal. But I think part of the reason why I make such a big deal out of it, not undergoing a lot of changes, but because that's the time in life when there becomes the situation where there's such a power struggle, and teenagers have an inherent a developmental need to uh, start becoming more independent. And so that's when you get this clash, because you have a style of parenting that I might refer to it as somewhat old fashioned, where it's like, I want respect, I want you to listen to me, you follow my rules, you do this, you do that. And it's not giving the teenagers enough ability to make their own decisions. And so it's like we need to look at it as this process where it's not like you follow all my rules and then one day you're out on your own and okay, now you learn how to be an adult. It's a gradual process. So once these kids start wanting to have this more independence, then it's literally a day by day process where some days they might want to try to make their own decisions, and other days they might come home and say, Mom, I need help. What should I do? So it's kind of this like back and forth, and it's this process that happens. But I wanted to highlight a style of leadership, which is why I think you and I get along so well, which is a transformational leader is the type of leader that's a coach. And so as a parent, we're trying to get the best out of our kids, and we want to see them succeed, and we want to have them not just survive but thrive in this world. And so it's like that's what I want to talk about. It's like, how can we help our kids without blaming and shaming? And it's like, let's be more curious about them. Let's ask them questions. So one thing I read in a book was, a lot of times teenagers don't want to go to sleep, and, they stay up late, they want to be on their phones, or they have excuses, they still have to study. And so one little piece of tidbit of advice I got was, instead of saying, hey, it's time to go to bed, you need to go to sleep, it's late, you're going to be tired tomorrow, blame, 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 blame. It's, what is your plan for tonight? What time do you think you'll make it to bed? And that gives the power and the choice to the teenager. And so then it's like a little mini training in their own mind. They get to think, oh, what time should I go to bed? What would be a good choice for me? And it's that practice of how to be an adult.
Yes, I would like to bring this to everybody's attention that is listening to us. A definition of a leader, there's 4 levels. First of all, it's like a level number 1 is like we have to learn to lead ourselves. So as a mom, I had to learn to lead myself first. And as I gained the tools and strategies to, like to implement my discipline, to implement my values, to show up every day, it's like that's level number 1. Level number 2 for a leader is being able to lead one more person, to be able to influence and guide them with the tools and techniques that you use to lead yourself. Right. So you pass it down to a next person. Mm-hmm. And the level 3 of a leadership is whenever you're able to lead a family, a group. And as parents, we call, all of us parents, we are leaders, but sometimes we have to go back to level number 1 and analyze and just reflect. Am I being a good leader for myself? It's like, am I showing up? And then if you are, then you're able to influence one more person with your abilities, with the skills that you gain. And what Laura is sharing, which I think is beautiful, is like with our teenagers, we can dictate because we won't get the results that we want. But if we begin to be curious, her and I share a beautiful mentor, Vinu Keller, and she has a phrase. It's like, don't be judgmental, like be curious. So like I love what you're saying is like, what if we become more curious with our teenagers, and if we notice, because we know as parents that what they're doing might be wrong, then we can be like, hey, so I'm just curious, what time are you going to bed tonight? Because I was wondering, and then you can come up with an excuse. So I was wondering if you can help me take the trash out. But it's like, begin that conversation of being curious by asking questions and being intentional, like we know where we're going because we're seeing it. But instead of judging and saying, hey, you need to go to bed right now because you have to go to school tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Be like, hey, I was just wondering, what time are you planning to go to school? To go to bed, yeah, because I need help with something. And then by then you're asking them, they're gonna give you the answer, and you can establish that conversation, and it just opens the opportunity for us to guide, I think. So I love that you brought that contrast of how sometimes we try to, like, I adopted the word dictate, like that's why I picture myself if I'm telling them what to do, then it's not fun. But if I begin to practice curiosity and asking the right questions, then there is more even love involved. Like we build that connection with our children.
Completely. And then that's again back to the whole topic of mental health. You know, there's all these brain chemicals. So, feelings, when it comes down to it, they're just chemicals in your brain. They're firing, and so it's like, well, why would you want to be in a state of, negative mental health if you have the choice and you have the power to, and we're setting a great example for our kids, not just, how to be a good kid, but it's really setting the stage for their entire life and their development and how they're going to relate to others in their lives, their personal relationships as adults and in a work environment. And so it's like, no pressure, parents, but let's do a better job. Let's be more positive. And I have another example, which was in order, since I started working with teenagers, I wanted to get kind of this inside scoop. I wanted to be on the inside. And so what I did was I became a substitute teacher in the middle school and the high school. And that gave me another view. Instead of just being a mom or a coach, I wanted to be on the inside and see what they're doing all day long when they're there and they're around their friends and they're around, teachers. So it makes me a little sad, but there's no blame or judgment here. It's just, as I walked down the hallway in the schools, what I heard a lot of were the teachers yelling at their kids, like, be quiet, get out your pencil, do this, do that. And it reminded me of just exactly what we were talking about with this style of parenting, the dictatorship. And it made me a little bit sad because it's like, well, it doesn't have to be that way. And again, teachers have been through, my sister's a teacher. They've been through so much pressure themselves with the pandemic and the way kids, when they came back in person, their behavior has just gotten exponentially worse and more challenging for the teachers. So I'm thinking that by the end of the year, they're at the end of their rope. But and I'm kind of bringing two topics together here, which was, you said your first style of leadership is to lead yourself. And I wish, parents, teachers, anybody who's working with kids would understand that, because what I like to think of it's like I have this imaginary, I have 4 kids. I'm a busy working mom. And so, the way I get the best out of myself and my kids as a leader is to imagine myself as this like insulated little bubble. And so I have to take care of myself. It's the idea of putting your oxygen mask on first. And so I have to take care of myself mentally and physically, so that way I can be the best leader for my kids. That way, when they get home with their problems, especially, I have a 14-year-old teenage daughter, and then I have a 12-year-old, almost literally just weeks away from being 13-year-old son. And then I have my 2 kids in elementary school, and, I hear it all. They all have their different personalities. And so they all express their emotions in different ways. And in order to kind of absorb the impact of all this different energy, I have to be at my best. And so the way I do that is by taking care of myself. And, self-care, to me, I don't love the term. It is what it is, but I think there's true science behind it. It's not just like, oh, let's take a bubble bath and eat chocolate. Like, it's like, let's actually take care of ourselves mentally and physically so we can be the best. And then there's science behind it. In fact, the CDC recommends, they have reading about self-care. But then I wanted to take it to the step of the side of the teachers. And so it's like, I wish, and I'm not saying, I know there's amazing teachers out there, and these little tidbits of what I am giving as the example is just, I probably caught them in the wrong moment. But when I went into substitute teach, I decided I'm going to just spread love and be loving to these kids and be curious about them and ask them questions. And I wasn't going to be this dictator type of a teacher. And I just loved it. In another life, I think I will be a teacher, because it's just, I love being around the kids. I love all the different energies there and personalities. And it's a true challenge. It is not easy
Yes.
what's happening. So yeah.
Yeah. I was a teacher for 2 years. I taught science, so I get you. It's like, yes,
Awesome.
yes. And here we go to back. Maybe, maybe they're at at the time of their life that they're not taking care of themselves. There might be something off. They're
Right.
not their brain health might not be balanced. Because I've been there, and thanks to Dr. Amen and his teachings, I was like, oh, brain health, oh, mental health, physical,
Yeah.
psychology, emotional, spiritual. So that's why we're here, you and I, to bring awareness about what mental health is. It's not just like you said. Uh, Sometimes we think mental health and it's like, oh, they need antidepressants, but it's like, no, mental health is also taking care of ourselves, and it goes back to being a leader, and being a leader is being a parent.
Hmm.
And I believe that definition of a leader is like create other leaders, it's like show up in a way that you can create other leaders. And as parents, that's why we're here. We want the best for our children, but I believe that fear sneaks in. Like sometimes fear sneaks in, and we educate, sometimes we tell, we talk to our kids with fear. Because I was there, I'm going to be honest, and my 16-year-old is the proof of it. He has seen my growth, he has seen my change, and he's like, Mom, it's okay if you snap at them, like the older siblings that he has. He's like, it's okay if you snap at them, like you did with me. They might need it a little bit. Because I mean, we talk because he's seen my growth. I wasn't a good leader because I was leading him with fear, the fear of he might go, take a different route. It's like, I need to make sure that he stays on track.
Hmm.
I was that type of mom.
Yeah.
So now that you're talking, is like I can resonate with what you're talking, because before brain health and neuroencoding, I was a total different person. I wasn't a bad person. It's just I was parenting with fear. So I would love for you to share with us, how can parents deal with fear? Sometimes they're afraid of handling a situation that maybe the daughter might be, like you mentioned, being bullied. How do you handle that situation in your case? How can you share with us a strategy that we could use and implement into our life?
Hmm. Well, I mean, certainly, first of all, there are just times where there are difficult conversations that need to be had. And instead of like looking at it through the lens of, wow, I need to talk to my child about, drugs or alcohol or sex. And it's like, whoa, that's uncomfortable. It's like that's what people are kind of thinking, like, oh, this is awkward. But it's like, well,
Hmm.
guys, this is your child, and you need to talk to them with love and concern. And that's the opposite of fear is love. And so it's like, let's go in and have this conversation and really hear them and hear what they have to say and how they want to be seen, and ask them these questions. And again, like, it's like what we were saying earlier, instead of sitting down with someone and say, hey, don't do drugs, don't smoke, don't do this. It's like, if your child is engaging in these risky behaviors, and hopefully, I like to ideally you that never happens, and you have taught your child the right coping skills of how to deal with stress and anxiety before it gets to that point. But inevitably, there are kids who are experimenting with all these things. I mean, they wouldn't, that's normal. And so it's like, instead of being fearful of, oh gosh, I have the kid who's vaping in the bathroom, it's like, well, let's just be curious. Let's love this child, and let's talk to them and have a conversation, and ask them, why do you feel like that's something you want to do, and just really listen to them, because you never know until you ask. And it's about having these open and honest conversations. And really, one thing I would like to point out is to try to take away the judgment, as we talked earlier, because when any human feels judged for who they are, they're going to shut down, and then they're going to feel defensive, and they're going to put up these walls, and you're not going to have an open and honest conversation. And so, to lead is to be kind of, is to get the best out of this person. And if you want to get the best out of them, you really have to look at them as already a complete person, not a project that needs to be fixed, not someone who's broken. but someone who is complete and whole, and they might just have kind of veered off track in their thinking, and then they need to kind of be brought back on. Reminds me of those little, the sheep dogs that are keeping the sheep in line. It's like kind of corralling, and that's what parenting is. It's kind of corralling, but it's not putting a leash on their neck and like walking them with a leash. It's giving them some space, giving them some freedom, incrementally as they get older. But it's just this guiding. And so the other thing to talk about fear is, a lot of times adults aren't comfortable with certain emotions. And so it's like, let's start to feel comfortable with feeling afraid. Let's feel comfortable with different emotions, because a lot of times the fear is what is creating that separation in the relationship, whereas people could be so much closer if there wasn't these kind of negative emotions, fear or jealousy or anger, or, you name it. That's kind of creating a barrier. And it's like, the idea is we want to have a closer relationship so that our kids will come to us. And, if they are thinking about, trying something, I mean, it's not like, you're not going to ever get a kid say, hey, mom, I'm thinking about drinking, but you never know unless you're having these types of conversations and you're asking and being curious. So
Yes. And understanding their point of view, because their brain is not fully developed till they reach 25 if it's a female brain, or 28 years old if it's a male brain.
yeah.
So we have to be aware as parents, their brain is not fully developed. And sometimes they get stuck, like as their brain develops, sometimes they get stuck on an idea. Like, I don't know if you notice any of your kids, but I noticed mine, he will only wear white or black, either hoodies or t-shirts. Like, they're very specific at a certain, like, that's just the idea that he has right now.
Mhm.
Or it would be like, if you take them to eat, they always order the same drink at Starbucks, or whatever you guys get a drink, like they get into, like, as their brain develop, sometimes they get stuck in one idea and they're going to keep it till their brain continues to develop, and then they're going to shift. So understanding how they're seeing things is important, because then we can come to the surface where it's like, oh, okay, I see how he's seeing it, or I see how she's looking at this situation. And then from there, then we approach with love and not with fear.
Mm-hmm.
And Laura, could you share with us that you share a technique with your parents and your teens that you coach, an alignment technique that I love.
Yes, for sure. And I do have one other thing to add on what you just said, which is getting stuck, getting stuck in these patterns. Um, those, records, old school records that you play music on, the vinyl. It's like for the younger audiences, you never know. They know who, but I don't. I'm sure there's a wide range of ages listening today. But it's like there's those grooves, and if you keep playing it over and over again, those grooves get deeper. And that's what our connections in our brain, the neurons are connecting. And so it's like, if you keep having the same thought over and over and over again, the groove and the connection, those myelin sheaths are getting stronger and thicker. I don't want to get too technical, too sciencey on us, but and so that's why, having these conversations is important, because it can break that cycle and break that connection, or not break it, but weaken it, and then give strength to more positive connections and positive thought patterns, which kind of leads perfectly into the question you were asking me, which was, I use a heart-brain coherence technique. I'm certified through Heart Math, and it's a kind of, you could say it's a form of meditation, but what it really is doing is a biological change in your body. So, our heartbeats have, these rhythms, and when we're under stress and anxiety, and overwhelm, you can see, they can measure these heart rhythms, and they're real jaggedy. It looks like it's not very pretty. And then when you put yourself in this heart brain coherence, the line becomes like really smooth and pretty. It looks kind of like a nice little smooth roller coaster. And that is a biological shift that happens in our body. And if you're going to use this technique, it's, I love to demonstrate it for people so they can try it out. And it's the type of thing where you don't want to just do it one time. It's something that it's a practice where ideally you're putting yourself in this coherent state multiple times a day. And that becomes a new pattern for you. And you can kind of become, it's a new way of life, a new way of living if you're in this coherent state. So, it's very, again, very biological, but it also is creating this positive mental space. So, when think about it, when we're stressed and we're anxious, there's a couple things that are happening, but that's when kids kind of tend to go for the quick fix. Like, oh, I want to feel better now, so I'm going to start eating candy and sugar, or I am upset, so I'm going to, reach and try vaping because that might calm me down, or I'm going to smoke a cigarette, or I'm going to drink alcohol. But it's like, well, if we can teach our teenagers, and really, quite honestly, Paula, a lot of adults need to learn this too. Let's just be, be honest.
Yes, yes.
Well, if we can teach better coping techniques, people are just going to be healthier. And so to get this, again, try not to be too scientific, but the vagus nerve is, part of our parasympathetic nervous system. That is the involuntary part of our system that creates like calm and relaxation. And so when we breathe and we put ourselves in this heart coherence, it's creating these calmer thoughts because the neurotransmitters that are being activated in your brain. Again, trying to stay off the science, but and then when you think about it, so that's what opens us up to being able to be better problem solvers. So, if you're stressed and anxious, your brain is very, it's like your focus is very narrow. So you're only thinking, I want to feel better, blah, 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 grab the Coke or the candy or whatever. But if we can calm ourselves down and create the heart-brain coherence, it's like suddenly our options open up. So we have this wider range of thinking, and then we're better able to problem solve because, going back to the mental health, anxiety, comes from a lack of powerless or feeling powerless. And it also, and so it's like, okay, give ourselves some power by giving ourselves options. Like, how can I, solve the problem that I have right now? And a lot of times, that problem is I feel bad. And as people, we need to be problem solvers. Like you said, it's level one of our leadership. How can I solve my own problem right now? I don't feel good. Something's making me feel bad. So yeah, I don't want to, go
Yeah.
far down on that.
Yeah, so you put your hands on your heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you focus on what you want. But it synchronizes. That's the beauty of it, that you synchronize your head and your heart at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes whenever we're on our head, that's what I tell my clients. When we're on our head, we're stuck and we just don't see beyond our nose. That's just we're stuck on an idea.
Mm-hmm.
But if you begin to see the situation from your heart, like if you have a problem in the office and you are the one in charge to fix it, let's say at home, we're talking about family and teenagers, before you go and handle that situation, go back to level number one, leadership. You have to learn to lead yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So by putting your hands and feeling your heartbeat, you synchronize, you think of what you want to focus on. How are you going to solve this problem? Maybe you're looking for an answer, and it just gives you a time for you to synchronize your heart and your head at the same time. And then the results are going to be way better than just going in there with the stress, the worry, the anxiety, the overwhelm that sometimes we don't know how to manage. So that's one beautiful strategy that I just wanted you all to be aware of in case you need it. You can use it. Now let's move on to, you want to add anything else?
I actually do want to add something to that. So, people, I think, naturally tend to think about what they don't want instead of what they do want. And so, I think there's part of that, but even to back it up a few steps before, it's like, well, to get in that right emotional space and putting our hands here and breathing, what we really want to do is what we're doing is activating our emotions of love. And so I think the best way to do that is to actually imagine, well, it could be a person, a place, or a thing. Personally, I think thinking of a person is ideal, but it could be whatever you want. Maybe you have a favorite spot that you feel you're most happiest when you are at the fill in the blank. Say it's like you have the spot on the beach that you love. And so when you're putting yourself in coherence, if you're imagining that and visualizing it in your mind while you're doing your deep breathing, yes. And you're activating these chemicals. And so in your body, the neurotransmitters, and that is how you're going to get out of that kind of narrow, stuck space, right? I can tell you're just like breathing in and out.
Yes, yes. I'm picturing the ocean.
You know, I mean, so it's like, think about you're going, if you're, in the corporate world and you're going into a stressful meeting, just even taking, ideally spend a few minutes doing this, but even if you only have a few seconds before you walk in that door, before that meeting, or before you log in that Zoom call, it's going to put you in a completely different space and better able to handle the pressure of the meeting, whatever might come your way. And when I did my heart math training, they taught us that even some people who are masters at this can even actually do it with their eyes open. So they can be in the middle of the meeting and they're looking at you and they're just sitting there, listening, and they're breathing in and out. They might not have to have their hand on their heart, but they're activating their heart breathing, just, completely eyes open. So it's a really cool tool that can be used, anytime, anywhere. And because it's making this biological shift, it's changing, your thought process and changing how you show up in the world.
Yes, and I love it. So I wanted to, we wanted to make sure we share that with you today. So let's shift now to our teens. Like how do you help a teen that is stuck on an idea? Like it is, like how do we change their perspective? Like whenever you're coaching them.
Yeah, so I have lots of tools, but if I were to give just one example today, is I teach them about narrative. It's a narrative technique where, it's like as if there's an author and they're writing your story. And, a lot of times when you, or watching a movie, there's different camera angles. And so a lot of times teenagers, they get stuck and they're just looking at their life through one specific angle, or you could say lens. And that, when I'm talking to the teenagers, they know exactly what I'm talking about. So here's my phone, and they're experts at taking selfies. And think about it, like they want the best selfie. They take hundreds of them to get the right one. And they do all their filters and, their photo editing stuff. And so when it's like, if you're taking a picture, you don't want your camera lens to be down here because that's going to make me look weird. It's looking at my nose. Or you don't want your camera to be like way over here because, that kind of, you want your camera to be like right in the right spot, get that right selfie, have everything looking good. And so I explain that's how they are in their lives. And so it's like, if they're only looking at things from a negative perspective, like having that phone down, they're going to have completely different results in their life, and they're going to be showing up in a completely different way than if they can shift that angle. And so that's something I try to help make that shift. And so we, when I do work with teenagers, we set goals. And so I use this emotion map that I have. I think you've seen it. And it's like, on the left side, it's all these like negative emotions. And it's kind of like that jaggedy line I talked about earlier. It's like we're out of coherence. Our cortisol is activated. We could be highly agitated, meaning our heart could be beating really fast, or we could be in like a low, like depressed state where it's like low energy, but it's negative. And then on the right side of this chart, this emotional mapping tool I have is, there's the upper right quadrant, which is positive, high energy, and that's activating all those good neurohormones in your body. And then there's bottom right, which is good. It's like calm, happy, relaxed. The top one is more excited, energetic, positive emotions. And so I'll show them this chart, and when, as we're doing our kind of narration of their, I'll say, tell me, let's write a story about your day. Tell me your day. And so what they'll do is, I'm like, you're the author, you're in charge. And so, slowly, it doesn't always happen right away, but like over time, they start to use adjectives to describe themselves. So it's like, I'm a loser, I suck, I'm terrible, I'm going to fail, blah, blah, that negative thinking. Mm-hmm. And so what I want is to shift into a more positive identity. And so it's like, I'm amazing, I'm awesome, I rock, blah, blah, blah. And so when we have this map that I talked about with the emotions, I say, where do you think you're spending the most time on this map? And they'll, I say, pick a point. And when I read their story back to them, I help them discover that they're on this like left side and they're very negative. And so I said, well, where would you like to be? And let's see if we can create a goal around a specific emotion or a set of emotions that is more positive. And so they'll say, well, I would love to feel more this or that, something happy, positive. And so it's like, well, let's figure out how we can go there. It's just like a roadmap. When you're driving around lost in a city, you don't know where you're going. You need a map. You need to figure out what your destination is. And a lot of times just even explaining that, bringing that to their awareness, they're like, oh, I never thought I had control over my emotions. I didn't know I had a choice. They just think that they have these feelings and that that's the only way to be. And it's like, oh no, you have options. Let's
Yes.
find where you want to go and how you want to do that. And so, it doesn't happen overnight, but it's like if we can bring this to their conscious awareness,
Yes.
then, they eventually, it's great. It's amazing. It's so fun to watch teenagers because, they are so quick. They are so smart. And once they get it, they're like, oh, okay, gosh. And that's why when I coach teenagers, I always coach the parents as well, because they need to be involved in this. You can't have a child who is dealing with stress and anxiety and trying to, who are learning these tools and techniques that are more positive, and then have the parent be at home, in their like negative, complaining, pessimistic, stress, anxious state. Back to your leadership point, this is level one. It's like, take care of yourself first and learn how to lead first. So that's why I always need to bring the parents in, because they need to learn these tools as well so that they can be modeling and setting examples for their kid. And it's kind of fun because, at the dinner table, a family typically would come to have a conversation over a meal. And so it's kind of cool when you hear, well, say, for example, one parent could call out their child and say, hey, it sounds like you had a rough day, and, talk to me about that. But then it's like, see if we can shift, like, well, remember, let's work on our emotion map. Like, let's think about this from a different camera angle. Like, how could you think about that in a different way? And so that's just, something that I help them with. And it's amazing. It's fun to watch that transformation happen.
That's beautiful. And I would like to share for all of you that you probably have heard me say this before, but it's like, as we think, so we feel.
Mm-hmm.
As we think, as we feel, so we do. That's how we behave based on our feelings. That's how we react, based on our feelings. So as we do, so we have. So I want you
Mm-hmm.
to think of like having a good relationship with your children, having a good relationship with your family begins with a thought.
Mm-hmm.
As we thought, so we feel. And that's what Laura is explaining. She's trying to shift their thoughts, because they think that they weren't fast enough because maybe they didn't make it to the tennis team, or they didn't make it to the basketball team, and they begin to think that they're not fast enough, tall enough, qualified for the team. So if they begin to create those negative thoughts, they're going to create negative feelings. They're not going to feel good about themselves. So how are they going to behave? And then, however we behave, that's what we create, what we have. So what are some of you and I know about automatic negative thoughts? Could you share about that?
Absolutely. I do have one more. I'm sorry, I keep adding on to you.
No, that, yeah, go for it.
But I do have one more thing to say about what you had just said, which is it's about also teaching, when I showed the camera lenses, I think the word I didn't use, but I should, to the people listening today, is the perspective. And so it's like you could have the exact same situation, but how people react to it and respond to it, it can be completely different. So it could be a traffic jam. One person's stuck in a traffic jam and they're, upset, let's just say, and negative and angry, and then this other person could be like, okay, well, there's nothing I can do about this, so I'm gonna look at it from a completely different point of view. I can't change it, so how can I think of it in a more positive way? So I just wanted to add that in about the word perspective. But yeah, so on to automatic negative thoughts. This is just a pattern or a cycle of thinking, and Dr. Amen has taught us 7 of the main ones that create those, like what I talked about, those deep record groups where they keep having them over and over again. And it's really, thoughts, feelings, behaviors changing their lives because they're thinking negatively. So the first one is all or nothing thinking. And that's just I always fail my Spanish test, or I never get a good grade. And then there's just the bad, which is adding the word, a lot of this, we get clues about what type of automatic negative thought it is by the specific words. So it's like, it's kind of starts out, sounds positive, but then there's a but, like I always, or no, that's not a good example. Like, I think I'm pretty good at fill in the blank, but it's also, and so it's like when you hear that but, that means they're focusing on the negative. The next is guilt beating, which is using the word shouldn't. So I shouldn't have done that. I made a bad choice. I shouldn't have thought that way, or I should do better next time. And it's like putting guilt on oneself can be just a negative thought pattern. The next is labeling, which is kind of just like name calling yourself. So I suck, that, teenagers, these are the words they use. I'm just repeating what they say, but I suck, I'm a loser, whatever, that's labeling. The next one is fortune teller, which is trying to predict the future. And it's just always assuming the worst. And that's like a very negative thought pattern. Thinking the worst possible outcome that could possibly happen. It's like, well, what makes you think you know that? There's no proof. And then mind reading, that's similar to fortune telling, but it's assuming the worst in people. So it's like, they must think my outfit isn't cute. They must think that I'm not cool or I'm not smart. It's like assuming other people's thoughts. And then the last one is blaming, and that's blaming the world, and that's playing a victim. And so it's like his fault or her fault or your fault that I am like this. And so these are just some patterns that if we can catch them and interrupt them, we're going to have some healthier people on our hands.
Yes, if we can learn to reframe them, like if one of, like, I'm going to give you an example. Yesterday, my daughter wanted to play puzzles. I said, yeah, we're going to play puzzles, in this evening. So she kept asking, and every time she asked, I was eating. So she's like, you're always eating, Mom. I was like, well, Avery, no, I'm not always eating, but like reframing it, because sometimes they just adopt a thought. But we're almost out of time.
Okay.
Where can we find you?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm positivelyhealthycoaching.com is my website. So that's how people can find me. And just, Positively Healthy Coaching is my company.
Yes. And like she coaches moms. She coaches the teens together as a team, so that you can see better results on our teens, like improving the quality of our parenting. You have about 1 minute left. Anything you want to add before we close?
I'm just so thankful for this conversation today, Paula. I think it's so important because, kids are, the schools are doing a better job now teaching these kind of social emotional skills. But just like we have to learn, math and science and reading, these are like these mental health skills that we kind of discussed today, some of these strategies and techniques. It's something that has to be learned. It's not something that we just know naturally how to do. So I really appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation about it and help other people, see these different perspectives.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all of you that are here listening to us. I hope you found value. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Blessings to you all, and thank you. High five.
Thank you. High five. Good to see you.